Hey guys, Manic Kieran here, back once again. In this video, I'm going to basically assess the compatibility of all 12 signs with Aries. Now, first of all, if you haven't watched the video titled "Watch This Before My Compatibility Series," please go watch that before this video, just because if you don't, you won't accurately understand the information I'm going to share in this video. So at any rate, let's start off with Aries versus Aries. So, of course, here we're combining Aries with its own sign, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. With this sign, I think overall it generally works. However, there are some downsides. So let's go through the downsides first, and then we'll go through some of the more positives of this dynamic. So first of all, Aries is very competitive, and it likes to be in charge. It likes to be the leader. It likes to be the initiator. It could also like attention a lot. And so when you're combining that energy with itself, both energies could kind of be vying for the same sort of role. They could both just be competing with one another to be in charge or for the attention, both sort of trying to initiate first, and they can't because the other, so that could be kind of annoying for Aries. I think that's the main issue I see here. But other than that, Aries definitely likes the chase. Aries likes in other words, it likes the whole courtship process. It likes trying to get something. It likes new things. It likes excitement. Aries gets bored really easily. And so both, when you're combining two Aries, they can both enjoy the chase with one another. And then once they get closer, the dynamic can continue to be exciting and dynamic enough to keep them interested, which doesn't always happen. So I think that actually works pretty well. And I've actually noticed a lot of couples between two Aries sun sign people, and I think that's why, because the rest of the signs just can't really compete with Aries in some aspects, just because they're so energetic and so competitive. So overall, yes, I'd say this is pretty harmonious. I think the only downside is because they have a lot in common. I mean, it works well because it's easy, because they understand each other. They understand how the other one thinks, because it's its own energy. The downside is it doesn't always help you to grow if you're just if you're just interacting with, if one energy is interacting with itself. It's not a complementary relationship. It won't really always benefit itself a whole lot, and so it's, in some aspects, won't be very challenging. But in general, I think two Aries energies would find each other exciting enough and challenging enough for it to work, I guess. So yes, I'd say overall this works pretty well. Next, we've got Aries with Taurus. This is a lot different. Whenever you have two signs next to each other, it's called a semi-sextile, and it's sort of an off and on type of thing. I mean, overall they have more different than they do in common. Aries is a very masculine sign. Taurus is a very feminine sign. So Aries is going to want to be impulsive and want to initiate. Taurus is very slow. It likes to take its time. I think there can be an attraction here, because Aries likes to initiate and Taurus will let it initiate. Taurus, can sometimes prefer the other person to initiate with itself, and so that can work, and there can be attraction because Aries is ruled by Mars, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and so you've got masculinity clashing with femininity. Even if the Taurus person is male and Aries person is female, it doesn't really matter. What I'm talking about here is, the initiation of the Aries with the Taurus, and the Taurus being receptive to that. And so that could work very well. I could definitely see an attraction here. Also, with Mars ruling Aries and Venus ruling Taurus, both are socially intelligent, and both definitely know what they want. Both are kind of self-oriented. So they do have enough in common where there could definitely be an attraction, but I think there's so much different with, Taurus being more responsible and careful and slow, and then Aries being, by comparison, more reckless or more impulsive. There's too much different, really, for them to understand each other or to get along. Also, Taurus can be kind of a homebody at times, and Aries wants to be out in the world exploring. So I think overall they're just kind of too different for it to really work. Next, we've got Aries and Gemini, and personally, I think this might be the best combination of them all for Aries, because you've got a sextile aspect here, meaning that they're two signs away, and whenever you have a sextile aspect, they are similar enough to understand each other, relate to each other, you know, have a lot in common, but they're also different enough to sort of benefit from one another, and for it to keep it interesting, basically. And specifically in this example, you've got Gemini, which is also very energetic, very youthful. Both are very curious signs. Both want to explore the world. Both can be very chatty. They're both very quick oriented. They think quickly. They're quick on their feet. So both will definitely enjoy each other's company and enjoy exploring the world or going on adventures. Both will have a lot of the same interests. But even some of the differences actually just help this combination work really well. So for instance, with this combination, I definitely see Gemini kind of letting Aries take the lead, and Gemini would kind of like to let Aries initiate, but at the same time, Gemini is very quick, and so it could definitely keep up with Aries. And then likewise, Aries would enjoy taking the role of the leader and being the initiator, and it could definitely do that with Gemini. So I think this just works super well. When I try to think of downsides, I don't think of a whole lot. Gemini can be it can actually be kind of introverted sometimes. Gemini can be very outgoing and very open and, you know, just spontaneous, but it can also be kind of withdrawn in its shell. But I don't think that would even be a problem. I think Aries would kind of activate Gemini even in that sort of state and sort of bring it out of its shell. You know, Gemini, they both like new things, and they both get bored easily. So Gemini would be very entertained and excited by just all the new stuff that Aries starts. You know, Aries is always starting new projects or plans or adventures, and Gemini would be so on board with that. I think it would be overall a lot of fun for both. So yeah, like I said, this is probably the best combination for Aries in my personal opinion. This works super well. Next, we've got Aries with Cancer. So now we're 3 signs away, and that makes a square aspect. A square aspect will be more contentious because when we're talking about signs, signs that square one another will always have the same mode, but they will always be a different element. So in this example, both are cardinal, so they both initiate seasons. Aries is the first sign of spring. Cancer is the first sign of summer. So they're both initiators, they're both leaders, but what they are initiating and how they initiate it is very different because they have different elements. So Aries is fire, so what it's initiating is very self-focused, self-actualized. It's all about itself and just its many desires and, you know, expressions of itself. Very self-focused. Cancer is water, so it's more focused about other people, specifically about your family most of the time. So Aries is a leader kind of just in general. Just its whole personality is centered around leading and initiating and starting things. Cancer is a leader, but it's more oriented towards family or the home. And so what you end up with is just a combination that is so different. Similar to Taurus, Cancer is very feminine, so you're combining a very masculine sign, Aries, which is with a very feminine sign, Cancer, and there can be an opposites attract there to some degree. I think even less of an extent to Taurus, though. I think there's more of an opposites attract between Aries and Taurus than there is Aries and Cancer. This just doesn't work very well. Both are kind of emotional signs, but Aries is more blunt and irreverent, and Cancer is more sensitive, and so I think Aries could be kind of offensive to Cancer or maybe annoying. But then Cancer could kind of be boring for Aries because Cancer is more slow. It's kind of a homebody. Aries is very fast. It likes to be out in the world exploring. So there's just nothing in common. There'd be a lot of friction between these. I just don't see it working. Yeah, so hopefully I think that gives you a detailed enough picture. So yay or nay, I say nay. This doesn't really work very well. And if you'll notice a pattern, it kind of goes yes, no, yes, no. Aries, Aries, yes. Aries, Taurus, no. Aries, Gemini, yes. Aries, Cancer, no. That's definitely a pattern which will continue. So Aries, Leo, yes, that works. 4 signs away, that's a trine. Anytime you have a trine between signs, they will be the same element, and the element dictates a lot of what the sign is, kind of more so than the mode does. So both of these signs are fire, so they'll have all the fire traits. They are adventurous, outgoing, optimistic, very energetic, excited. Their emotions are usually towards the happy or excited or angry spectrum. They're not melancholy. You know, they're just very active in general. More dominant, very expressive. What else? Charismatic. You know, they enjoy attention. They like attention from people. So yeah, they have a lot in common. And whenever you have signs that are similar, it will just be easy for them. They relate to each other, they understand each other, they speak the same language, they have a lot in common, you know, a lot of the same interests. They'll enjoy the same types of activities, so they'll both be very active and enjoy exploring the world. Both very energetic, so they can keep up with one another. The only challenges I see, kind of similar to combining Aries with Aries, is that Leo also likes to be the leader. It also likes attention, and so they can both be, and they're also both very competitive. Fire signs are kind of competitive, so you know, they could be competing for the same role again, and they could be fighting, you know, to be the leader and to get the attention. So that's the main point of contention that I could see here. Other than that, it works really well. I see this as more being like a friendship dynamic if we're talking about combining two different people, just because they have so much in common, I guess. You know, it is beneficial to relate to another energy so easily, and to have that flow between, you know, just that easiness. But they're so similar that they wouldn't really learn a whole lot from one another, and you just don't have that opposites attract thing. So the only difficulties would be in how similar they are, and I guess how easy it is in a way, even though that's kind of contradictory. Also, on that point, Aries likes a challenge, and so because they're so similar, Aries could actually get a little bit bored. Another issue could be Leo's fixed and Aries is cardinal, so Aries might be too unstable for Leo. But in general, they're both fire, so they both like initiating, so I don't see that as being too much of a problem. Overall, yes, they have very much in common. This would be a very easy connection. Yeah, they're both very compatible. Next, we have Aries with Virgo. This, in my opinion, is the worst combination of all of them for Aries, and I guess for Virgo in this example. So the reason why, so we're 5 signs away now, so that makes a quincunx aspect. And if you think about the word quincunx, to me it just sounds like an awkward, kind of problematic word. Quincunx, it almost sounds kind of like a train wreck, and that's kind of what the quincunx aspect is like. So it's very aptly named. It is problematic and awkward, and because in my opinion, whenever you're combining 2 quincunx signs, they could not be more different from one another. You know, even signs that are directly opposite to one another, they are opposite, but they still have a lot in common. Aries is directly opposite Libra, and on either side of Libra are the signs that quincunx Aries, so Virgo and Scorpio. But even Scorpio has more in common with Aries because it's ruled by Mars. They have that Mars rulership connection. So Virgo just has the least in common with Aries. You can't get much more different than this pairing. Aries is fire, Virgo's earth. Aries is the beginning of spring, Virgo's the end of summer. Aries is masculine or dominant, Virgo's more submissive or feminine. Aries is more optimistic, Virgo's more pessimistic. Oh, the modes too. Aries is cardinal, Virgo is mutable. There's so much different. You can't get more different. It's hard to even think about anything that they have in common. So yeah, they just don't have anything to connect to. They won't really understand each other. Aries will see Virgo as being boring and pessimistic, kind of a wet blanket, I think. Virgo will see Aries as being just reckless and out of control and, you know, stressful, maybe annoying. Yeah, there's just not much in common at all. I think there could definitely be an attraction because there is an opposites attract whenever you have 2 very different signs. So Aries might be attracted to Virgo initially just because it's so different, and Virgo could kind of seem like a challenge. Aries could maybe see that Virgo is intelligent, or, you know, there's something going on in Virgo's mind, and Aries might find that attractive or might find it as a challenge, and so they might enjoy that pursuit. But from there, one of 2 things would happen. Either Aries would realize Virgo's not interested, this just isn't gonna work, I can't get any closer, so Aries would move on, or Aries would get closer to Virgo because Virgo would, I guess, also be interested. But then I think Aries would quickly realize this is kind of boring for all the reasons I just stated. Virgo's just not as active. Virgo's more intellectual. Aries is not really an intellectual. It's more just, Aries is a lot more active and Virgo's more passive. So it just wouldn't really work. I also don't see Virgo being super interested in Aries. Maybe I almost see Virgo as like maybe studying Aries just because they're so different from itself. But yeah, so yay or nay, I say big no on this. It just doesn't work. They just wouldn't get each other. It just wouldn't work at all. Next, we've got Aries with Libra. So these signs are directly opposite one another, and so of course with this you do have an opposites attract. Aries likes to initiate. Libra likes to, Aries likes to, or Libra likes to follow, or it likes someone else to initiate with it. And so this can work really well. It can be very complementary. You also have the Mars-Venus dynamic, where Aries is very masculine. It's ruled by Mars. And then Libra, even though it's a yang sign because it's air, it's still ruled by Venus. And so it's still kind of relatively feminine in some aspects. So yeah, you do have that push and pull and that attraction there. It can be very magnetic. They're both very socially intelligent, and just with that whole dynamic of Aries being the leader and Libra being the follower, it can work really well. Aries can like a partner that's more cool and calm and collected to sort of balance itself, and then Libra can like something more exciting and more blunt, different from itself. So yeah, they could both benefit a lot from each other and still have enough in common for it to work well. So this is a really good match. The only difficulties I see is Aries can sometimes like a sign to follow it, so it can be the leader, but can also like an energy that's more competitive or energetic. And so depending on the placement or depending on the person, it might fall into one or both of those different desires, I guess, when it comes to other energies outside of itself. And so Libra can either be quirky and very active and energetic, and then it would flow very well with Aries, but it can also be more kind of stern or introverted, and depending on what Aries wants, Aries might be attracted to that opposites attract dynamic, or it might be too different where Aries kind of is turned off by, it might find Libra boring if it's too inactive or passive or withdrawn. And then likewise, if Libra's too kind of internalized, it could find Aries to be too rambunctious or too rowdy, I guess. But in general, this works pretty well. It just kind of depends on what exactly we're talking about. So overall, I'd say yes, Aries and Libra works pretty well. Next, we've got Aries and Scorpio. So I did touch on this a little bit. They're quincunx again. So in order from now on, the angles will go just in descending order. The same thing though. So in order, the major aspects went sextile, square, trine, and then quincunx, which is a minor aspect. Now we've had the opposition, and then now it'll just go in descending order. So quincunx with Scorpio, and then trine, square, sextile, etc. So with Scorpio, yes, it is a quincunx, so they have a lot, more different than they have in common. Both at different times of the year, different elements, different modes, very different. What you do have in common, though, is the same ruling planet. So what that translates as is Scorpio is more pessimistic and withdrawn and kind of more serious, more sensitive, and Aries is more rambunctious and, more impulsive, active, more external. So they're very different. Of course, you could have the opposites attract. Aries could enjoy the challenge or the chase of Scorpio, and they would speak the same language to some degree with that Mars rulership. So both would be sort of both would be very sexual, both would be very ambitious, so they'd be very goal oriented. Both are, what else, but both are sort of oriented towards the self, and that could either hurt or help the relationship. So both are ultimately interested in their own self-preservation. Because they're both ruled by Mars, they're very individualistic signs. So again, that could hurt or help the situation, because while they might speak the same language, if they're interested in themselves only, that would make it more difficult for them to accept each other's differences. And so overall, I would say no, this doesn't work so well, because although you do have the Mars commonality, there could definitely be an attraction there. Could be very sexual, very exciting, but at the end of the day, there's just so much different. Scorpio is more calculating, Aries is more spontaneous, and then with that self-focus and the Mars focus, I just don't see them being open-minded enough to accept one another's differences. So I'd say overall, yeah, it just wouldn't work super well. Next, we've got Aries and Sagittarius. These are trining now. So both are fire. And again, like I said with Leo, both are outgoing, spontaneous, impulsive, very excitable, very active. Both want to go on adventures out in the world. Both have a lot in common. They'd have fun with each other, be challenging enough, but also just very easy in general. Both would keep each other entertained. Both are very energetic. They could keep up with each other. So yeah, this is definitely like a really good friend energy, again, just because they have so much in common. It'd be very easy. There's a little bit of difference there, and the differences could help or hurt the relationship. So Sagittarius is mutable and Aries is cardinal. So out of the two, Aries would be the leader more than Sagittarius, and that could be good, actually. I mean, if Aries wants to be the leader, then Sagittarius might work very well, because like Gemini, it could keep up with Aries, but also enjoy letting Aries take the reins, I guess. So that could work very well. Sagittarius is more intellectual though, and Aries is more, it's not so much intellectual, so it could be contentious there just because they wouldn't relate on that aspect. Aries can be very intelligent though, so it kind of depends. But overall, I definitely see more ease with this combination than I do challenges. So yes, I'd say this works pretty well. Next, we got Aries and Capricorn, which to me is just really interesting and fun to analyze, but I don't think it'd be as fun, to be involved with this combination. So overall, they make a square aspect, so they have the same mode but different element. So both begin seasons. Aries begins spring, Capricorn begins winter. Aries is fire though, and Capricorn's earth. So they are both initiating things, but they're different. Overall, I mean, Aries is ruled by Mars and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and while both are ambitious, they are ultimately very different. Capricorn is kind of cold and calculating and more internal. Aries is spontaneous and energetic. So Capricorn could see Aries as being stressful or just out of control or irresponsible, and Aries could see Capricorn as being kind of boring or too serious. Stick in the mud is what I'm thinking. So yeah, they have more different than they do in common. There is a Mars connection, with Mars in domicile in Aries and in exaltation in Capricorn. So they do share some Mars traits. Both are very, very independent. These signs, out of all of them, I see as being business owners. A lot of business owners have, Aries Sun or Capricorn Sun, or just charts dominated with those signs. So both are sort of capitalist in a sense, because they're serving their own interests. And so I think that, like, I could imagine Aries and Capricorn as, if we personify the signs for a second, I could see them as being like business owners who maybe work together in some way or trade with one another, something like that, just because their interests serve one another. Like, they could interact well as long as they're both, as long as it's in their own best interests, I guess. But in general, Aries and Capricorn, they wouldn't benefit each other emotionally. So I don't see them being attracted to each other, especially like if we're talking about a relationship. It would have to be, I'm thinking business. I don't know what other examples like that, but something where it's in their own best interest to associate with one another. Not very emotional of a connection, I don't think. So overall, I'd say no. These are two very different signs. They kind of clash. Even with the focus on the self. Again, kind of like with Scorpio, that would kind of just make them less able to be more tolerant of each other's differences. So I don't think this would work super well overall. Next, we've got Aries and Aquarius. In general, this works really well. This is a sextile aspect, so they are similar enough to have a lot in common and for it to be easy to speak each other's language. But they're different enough to keep it interesting and exciting, and for them to learn from one another. So both are very provocative, and they can be wild and rebellious. So both like being weird. They like, you know, getting attention for being different and edgy, stuff like that. So both could kind of get off on that, and both are masculine or yang signs, so they both would like going out in the world, having adventures. Both are socially intelligent, so they do have a lot in common. They could have a lot of fun together. The difficulties I see could be Aquarius kind of has two sides to it, in my opinion. It can be eccentric and wild and rebellious, but it can also be more stern and more disciplined and structured and introverted. And so that side of Aquarius, the more Saturnian, you know, structured, disciplined, internal side, that would clash with Aries. I don't think it would work super well. You know, the Saturn energies are so long-term focused and so cautious, they just wouldn't rub off well on Aries' impulsive, you know, relatively more reckless nature or reckless approach to things. So so again, kind of like with Capricorn, Aquarius could see Aries as just being stressful and out of control and irresponsible, and then Aries could be kind of bored by Aquarius if it's that more Saturnian side of Aquarius. But if it's the eccentric, wild, rebellious side of Aquarius, then yes, this word would work super well with Aries. So it just kind of depends, but overall I'd say yes, they do have a lot in common. This would work pretty well. Lastly, we've got Aries and Pisces. Now, this is a semi-sextile because we're combining two signs that are immediately next to one another. And so whenever you do that, you've got signs of a similar time of year, or, you know, similar locality. They're close to one another, so they're sort of in the same context. But I like to think of them as being siblings because they're from the same time, generally speaking, but they can still be very different. Like, you could imagine two siblings being close in age but having very different personalities. That's how this is. So, but specifically with this combination, Pisces, they are similar times of year because they're right next to each other. But on the other hand, they are also not at the same time of year. In the zodiac, Aries is the first sign. It's the beginner, the initiator. Pisces is the last sign. So although they are sort of close to each other, on the other hand, you know, they're almost as far away from each other as you could be. So overall, they have a lot different between each other, maybe even more so than Taurus would with Aries. Aries is fire, Pisces is water. Aries is cardinal, Pisces is mutable. So Aries is very definite. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's very black and white. Pisces is more wishy-washy. It's kind of complicated. It's neither here nor there. And so that could intrigue Aries. Aries could enjoy the chase and could be kind of on its toes, not knowing what to expect next from Pisces, and that could be very interesting. But on the other hand, Pisces sort of wishy-washiness or the nuance in Pisces could just be annoying and confusing for Aries as well. Likewise, Pisces can have kind of a wild side to it, so they could both kind of enjoy like a good party or a good adventure. But at the same time, Pisces is more sensitive, it's more reflective and more sincere. Aries is more irreverent and blunt. So Aries could kind of get on Pisces' toes. It could be offensive to Pisces. Pisces could be too sensitive or too sentimental for Aries. Overall, this would be a big clash. You're mixing fire with water, which makes steam, which it makes everything foggy and confusing. So overall, I'd say no, this doesn't really work super well. They're just so different. They would have to be very whole within themselves, and they'd have to have something uniting them, something enabling them to understand and tolerate each other's differences. So overall, I'd say no, this doesn't work super well. So that concludes this video. Hopefully that was interesting to you. That was just my take on the compatibility of the 12 signs with Aries. If you have any suggestions at all of any topics you'd like me to cover, please comment below. I love hearing suggestions from you guys. And at any rate, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.